Dr. Dan's Freedom Forum is on the air.
Good evening. This is Dr. Dan, and this is Freedom Forum Live, streamed live every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Every day, new and frightening information about vaccine risk comes to light. In wake of COVID hysteria and unconstitutional vaccine mandates, our question tonight is, who owns your body? The World Health Organization and the UN think they should own your body so they can depopulate the earth and control the world. Vaccine mandates are one of their tools designed to make you sick, weak, and subservient, but that can only happen if you don't know the truth and if you don't have the guts to say no and refuse to give informed consent. Tonight, my guest is Karen Schoen, patriot, talk radio host, marketing consultant, journalist, advocate, and citizen lobbyist, and public speaker, former candidate for Florida House, director of the Panhandle Patriots, and an advisor to Florida Citizens Alliance. What does Karen Schoen believe? I'll tell you in her own words, and I quote, "I learned that everything is connected, nothing is random, everything has a plan, all plans are based on lies. I believe that applying the knowledge is power. You can be a champion or a victim. You can't be both. Ask yourself, is America worth saving? If yes, then what will you do to help save the republic? Doing nothing is affirmation." Karen is the host of Prism of America's Education on America Out Loud News. Karen Schoen, welcome as a guest on Dr. Dan's Freedom Forum Live.
Well, Dr. Dan, it is always a pleasure to be with you and to be able to speak to you, because this is a very severe and very strong message. And if we don't get it out and our people do not learn, and by our people, I mean the American people, do not learn what reality is, and they get hooked on nonsense and spend their time wasted instead of looking at serious issues like vaccines and what are they doing to us. And more, I'm sure that you heard Dr. Ladapo, who is the Surgeon General of Florida, said, no more vaccine mandates for kids going to school. And now everybody is crazy about no more vaccine mandates. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? I didn't hear him say you can't have any vaccines. All I heard him say was there are no mandates. Make your own choices and do what you feel is best for you and your family. And unfortunately, this is a big problem, as we see, because too many Americans are incapable of making choices, and they need that big old government to make the choices for them. So thank you, Dr. Ladapo. And even though, and the horror of it all was that he didn't investigate. All he did was say, make your own choice. What a horrible thing to say to people.
Well, what an American thing to say to people. That's what the Constitution is all about. It's about choosing. Our founders gave us the framework in which we can choose to be what we want to be. States can choose what they want to be, and individuals have the right to make those choices. Because as I said, who owns your body? I know that I own my body. I know, Karen Schoen, that you own your body. That is really the key to everything. And if you own your body, then you make choices about what goes into it, what comes out of it, and what you do with it. That is a very important decision, because as we're going to see as we go on our discussion tonight, Vaccines are an extreme risk. So, vaccines and their side effects, as you just mentioned, are in the news, not just in the state of Florida. And I know that you watched the RFK Juniors on the Senate hearings. How do you see this all playing out?
Well, my takeaway is that the opposition is shaking in their shoes because more and more information is coming out, which will show us the reality of vaccines. And to me, it was a total 100% display of the communist playbook. These people, these senators that had this hearing, had absolutely no desire to hear what Bobby Kennedy Jr. was saying. They had their listed talking points, and it didn't matter what he said, how he said it, what emphasis he put on whatever. They were not interested. The only thing that they wanted to do was have their talking points. My favorite sentence of the whole day of 3 hours, which I happened to watch, was when Kennedy said to Senator Wilden, "You've been in this body for at least 20 years. Our kids are getting sicker. And now is the only time that you want to do something about it." Think about that, folks. 20 years in our government, and now is the only time that they feel that it is important for them to speak. Why is that? Because Bobby Kennedy is putting up opposition, and they're not used to opposition. They're not used to hearing anything that is against what they say, because don't forget, Dr. Dan, they're smarter than we are. And they have to be in charge, not us. What do we know? We're only lowly people that control our own bodies, maybe, and they can't have that at all.
Well, that's what it's all about, Karen, isn't it? It's all about control. Everything that we're seeing from the federal government, one way or another, is about control. They want to control us. Most of us, fortunately, don't want to be controlled. So, what it comes down to is, how do we get people to get off the couch, to stand up, and not be afraid to point their finger at someone in power and say, "I'm not accepting you controlling my life"? What do we do?
That's a really, really tough question, surprisingly enough, because that control is really supposed to start when a person is a child through their family and then be reinforced by their schools. But the schools are not teaching people about controlling their body, how to become the best, how to be an American exceptionalism, how to challenge, how to ask the right questions. What they're teaching is, this is the government. They are correct. You will obey. You will comply. Otherwise, you'll be sitting in the corner with the dunce cap on. And we will make fun of you. We will cancel you. You will not count. And today, unfortunately, with 3 or 4 generations of this going on, the people don't even know that they're being controlled. To me, that's the sad part. They don't even know that they can't make a decision, because the minute they have to make a decision, what do? Where's my phone? Where's my laptop? Where's my tablet? I have to be able to check and see if what I'm saying is all right. Does it fit? And am I allowed to say that? And that's wrong. That's not America. So unfortunately, they don't know the First Amendment. They don't know they have the right to say whatever it is that they want to say, good, bad, or indifferent, or wonderful. They don't know that they can do that. And as a result, they don't. So me personally, I believe that if we don't change our schools, and we don't change what's going on in the schools, it is not going to make any difference what you and I sit and say, how many people we get to agree with us in 4 years when those kids graduate. they'll be right back to the same spot and we'll have the same conversation over and over again. And it's very sad because the thing that I revered the most as a former teacher, it makes me crazy to see what's happening in our schools and how the communist idea is overshadowing everything else. So much so that I remember my mother used to say to me, if your friends were going to jump off the Empire State Building, would you follow them? And I would go, no, what a stupid thing to do. Isn't that dumb? Well, today, if you ask those kids the same thing, they would go, oh, yeah, where do I stand online? Because they don't know they can make their own decision.
My mother used to say exactly the same thing. So I think we must have been raised by parents of the same generation. I think that generation of our parents really instilled in many of us all of those wonderful values that we need to instill into our children and grandchildren's generation. One of them was the value and importance of work. That my father was, I would guess you might say he's fanatic about it, because when I was young, about 10 or 11 years old, and I wanted at that point, the rage was a 3-speed English bike. He wouldn't get it for me. He said, you better go out and earn some money. It wasn't a lot of money. I think it was, $90 or something. So he made me go out and work, cutting lawns and anything else I could find in order until I had enough money to go ahead and buy that bike. That taught me a big lesson. And it kept with me for my whole life. Work, the ability, not just the ability, but the desire to work and recognize the importance of work. It is your freedom to choose your job, to choose your career, and then to be excellent at it. That is something that is missing now, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. And you reminded me, I was 13 years old and I got my first job, and that was babysitting. And I became the babysitter, and I guess would be called a nanny, because I was helping with the children. But it gave me the ability to be free myself and have that extra money to go out and buy something, which I had to have that dress. I just had to have it for the prom. It was so important for me to have it. And that's what I saved my money for. I think what happened to us is that my generation, made the decision that we're going to give our kids whatever they want. And we really did them a huge disservice by giving and giving. What we should have been giving and giving is love and respect and their ability to be able to be individuals and understand rights and understand the American dream, the American way, instead of saying, oh, here's a phone, go sit in the corner and play with your phone. Here's the TV. I think TVs were wonderful, but we didn't have them all the time, and they were incredibly expensive. And having a TV in my house was not something. Mom never said, as the babysitter, go sit and watch TV. She would say, go read a book. When was the last time someone said, go read a book? And as a teacher, you learn that if you find what a child is interested in, you can teach them anything through that interest. You can teach them math, you can teach them science, you can teach them how to read and write, just because they're learning something that they're interested in. And confusing them with what's going on today does not make for a healthy child. And sadly, it makes for children that grow up and will sit on a train and slit somebody's throat for no reason. And who do we have to blame? My answer is look in the mirror, because it's us. We are the ones that did that. And what do we do to correct it? We've got to get involved. And I remember saying this on my show, and after it, I got an email from one of my listeners, and she said, I listened to what you said, and what you have been saying all of these years. And I have 5 grandchildren. And every day I am their teacher on Zoom. They live all over the country. We get on Zoom. I become the teacher. I am homeschooling my grandchildren, and they are wonderful. And that's what getting involved means. That's what we need to be able to do. We need to bring back the family, the love, the guidance that the family brought us, and go back to church, God, or whoever it is that gives you that moral compass, because morality goes hand in hand with liberty. You can't have liberty and not be moral. And if you have no morality, liberty is not going to show up all of a sudden. It doesn't work that way.
Well, we are aware, of course, that the government uses and the deep state use a number of tools in order to exert control, in order to take away our control. In our recent history, the COVID hysteria, the COVID epidemic, was one of the major tools they used to take control over life. And it was amazing to me to see how docile so many people were. And I understand that when something you are presented with, like a disease, appears at the beginning to be so dangerous and so lethal that you really have to be concerned. And what do you expect? You expect some government and some government agencies to be truthful with you, to lead you in the right path. And unfortunately, when the government does not have your best interests at heart, when the best interests of the government are the Big Pharma and their profits and their own self-profiting of the people in government and the bureaucrats who all want to get rich off our tax dollars playing with our money, that's when they put out information that is blatantly false and misleading. And so I don't know whether I can really blame people, at least in the beginning, from being afraid and kind of looking for some guidance. The problem was it really shouldn't have taken that long for people to stand up and say, wait a minute, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to wear a mask walking around the street with no one around me. I'm not going to get together with my friends. I'm not going to go to restaurants. And you know that is what it would have taken for people to break the government stranglehold on us during the COVID hysteria. We would have had to say, I'm not going to take this anymore. You are leading me astray. What about that?
Well, first of all, I think part of the problem is we have been trained to listen to experts. And what we should be doing is seeing who these experts really are and what their motivation really is. And of course, where their money comes from, because that's really what creates the expert in America. And to me, you and me and everyone else is an expert for your own family. You are the expert. I used to tell my, when I had a mortgage company and I was training my loan officers, I used to tell them, remember, you are the expert. Anybody who's 50 miles away from their home carrying an attaché case is the expert. So learn your topic and become that, because people rely on you. Unfortunately, the lies have become part of our everyday life, and we do not go and waste time to seek the truth. So we take the word of the expert and we figure, oh, well, they're just like me and they're going to want to do the right thing for everybody else, without understanding, as you had mentioned before, human nature. And human nature is incredibly selfish and incredibly greedy. And you have to look back and you have to see who are the people that are giving you advice, and where is that advice coming from? And unfortunately, most of the people don't want to take the time to do that. It's easier, especially when you're afraid, it's easier to listen to somebody else and to take their advice because they must know what they're doing. Well, guess what? These so-called experts had no idea what they were doing. And that's coming out now. They didn't know, they didn't check, they had no test models to base anything on. And all they were doing was guessing. And you know what? Our guesses were better than theirs. But we weren't paid the big bucks by the government. So once you filter in the money and you filter in the lies, we the people, unless we are cognizant of what this is all about, and I truly believe that, as you said in the beginning, this was not a disaster to them. This was a huge success. Look, they killed how many million people? Their goal is depopulation any way possible. So it didn't matter to them. Life is expendable. They don't care. They don't care about life. They don't care about human beings. They don't care about anything except themselves. And by allowing them to manipulate us, shame on us. We should have known. We should have accepted. I mean, but didn't President Trump in the very beginning talk about hydroxychloroquine, and then they shut him up? Where were the other doctors saying, no, wait a minute, this is a great remedy, and maybe we should try ivermectin too? They were great remedies. Where were those people? They were paid off. They were afraid they would be canceled. Was that the deal? How sad is that we have come to that?
Well, you know, one of the problems is you talk about information. I think information is extremely important if you're going to make any decision. The problem we're running into is that our sources of information have been corrupted. We really cannot bank on the truth that we hear from, certainly not from the media. The mainstream media has been shown to be nothing but lies. And then you get into the internet sources of news, and most of them, it's very, very difficult to know what the truth is and what's not the truth. I'm going to give you an example from the COVID era of one of the things that they used to really fool us about vaccines. And I think we should talk a little about vaccines because you mentioned in the beginning how the state of Florida did the absolute incredible thing of saying to people, yeah, you can make your own choice about vaccines. It is no longer legal to fire people, to force them to put something in their body that we now know is so incredibly dangerous. So one of the things that Big Pharma did is they used two different terms, relative risk reduction, and that is what they used instead of using absolute risk reduction. That is one of the ploys they use to trick us into believing that the vaccines were safe. So how does this relate in the real world? Well, I'll give you a hypothetical data set that illustrates this phenomenon. It's really very interesting. Assume that 10,000 individuals receive a placebo injection, an inert dummy, and another 10,000 are given a dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, and that the number of new infections with COVID is determined over the next 4 months, confirmed by PCR test. Assume further that there are 100 cases of infection in the placebo group and only 10 in the treatment group. The relative risk reduction would be 90%. But the absolute risk reduction is 90 cases prevented among 10,000 given vaccine, which is 9,000%, 0.9. So they fooled us into believing that these vaccines were enormously effective. 90% reduction of risk is what they would tell us. But in actuality, the real risk in this case was less than 1%, which means out of 1,000 people who were exposed, only one would get it naturally. And that goes along with all of the vaccines that we're dealing with now. We have no reason to be taking these vaccines. One of the interesting things I learned was that things like the measles vaccine and those kind of vaccines, by the time the vaccine came out, the cases, the incidence of the disease was plummeting close to zero. So then they took credit by giving you the vaccine and saying, look, the disease has gone away, when in actuality it was going away all the way on its own. So those are some of the things that they did to fool us into taking them. And then, of course, we can talk a lot about the deaths and disease of COVID vaccine deaths, which I know you know plenty about.
Well, the biggest problem that I saw with them, which is what made me not take it, was nobody was talking about the side effects. Nobody was saying the what if. And I like to read when I'm taking a medicine, I like to read the whole thing of what the medicine is about and what are the possibilities. And when I see can affect your liver, can affect your kidney, I say, no, thank you, not interested. Because the chances of me getting liver disease or kidney disease is minimal compared to when I would take a vaccine. So for the last years of my life, all my years of my life, since I stopped going to elementary school, I have not taken any vaccines. And you know what? I never got the flu. I never got any side effects from anything. I never was in a hospital for anything other than to visit someone. So by not giving us the full picture, they are giving a huge disservice, I don't even think that word is strong enough, to the American people, because they're not telling us the what if part, what can happen if. And then what they did made absolutely no sense. So of course it made me feel much more definitely that I was not going to take it. When you say a church has to be closed because it's non-essential, but we'll leave the bar across the street open. And by the way, you can go and get your heroin shots over there. And when you see that happening, and you can't confiscate, you can't be congregating with more than 10 people, and then you see the BLM riot, and that was okay to be able to be together with hundreds of people, something, what's wrong with this picture? And then when you dig a little deeper, you realize these vaccines are a lot of garbage, but they're a huge moneymaker, and that's what this is all about. Not only do they want control, not only do they want power, but they also want the money. And to me, that's what this whole thing was all about: money, power, and control. How far can we push the American people until they say, no more, we're not going to do this anymore? And you know what? The sad part is I still see people wearing masks. And I see people wearing masks as they are driving alone in their car.
That to me was one of the most ridiculous things that I could say. I see people driving alone in a car with a mask on.
Yes, God.
What are they afraid? Is the air conditioning blowing germs out? Did someone see COVID in the air conditioning system? Is what is coming out of the radio poisoning their brain, coming through their ears? I'm not sure why, but you're right. I mean, this whole COVID, and I think it's important to talk about the fact that this had worldwide implications, because it was not just the United States that was involved. This was a planned attack on freedom around the world, not just in our country. Our country is the primary target because we have 350 million people. It's pretty hard to corral 350 million people. But when you add the world to it, you start seeing deaths all over the world. People start to sort of look around and say, what is going on? But this is part of a bigger picture, Karen, isn't it?
It certainly is. And to me, we go back to their main goal. What is their main goal? Depopulation. And again, they will do it any way, shape, or form. And then when you realize what came out of this and the way the hospitals behaved, anybody in the hospital, no matter what their disease was, they were dead because of COVID. And then we were told that they get money. They're getting more money.
Lots of more money.
Yes, if COVID deaths were the issue. So the whole thing to me was, this to me is not a real disease. This to me does not sound like it's anything more than step 2 of a flu. And yes, there are some people who will die. People die of pneumonia. People die of all different things. But there are usually other factors that go along. Maybe they didn't have a strong heart. Maybe their kidneys weren't functioning properly. Maybe their liver was, who knows what the problem was. You have to look at what could have caused this person to, quote, have COVID and then die of COVID, when I really didn't think that COVID was any strong disease. And now that I think of it, they had to choose something like COVID. They had to choose something that really was not as disastrous as they made it out, so they could blow it up and make it disastrous. And what's scarier than telling a little kid you have to wear a mask in school and you have to sit 5 feet away or 6 feet away from your friends, and you can't have friends.
Which a distance that was fabricated, by the way.
Yes.
Totally fabricated.
And then when you hear you have to put your mask on in between bites, oh, give me a break. I mean, you're eating and mask on, mask off, mask on, mask off. Maybe they should have had a flap in the mask so that you could have lifted it up and just eat. It was a total fraud. And unfortunately, we, the people, bought into it. And I think that they learned too much from us. They learned too much as to what buttons to push. And that's why we are in a lot of the problems that we're in right now. I don't believe that if COVID didn't happen, we wouldn't have a Mamdani a communist running for mayor in New York. But people were so afraid that they bought into socialism. They bought into these policies that kill people. Again, kill people. That's the goal. And it's sad to recognize that that's the goal.
They also bought into getting vaccinated with untested medications, which we knew pretty quickly had some very, very serious side effects. There were people who right away became very ill. There was the pericarditis, Guillain-Barré type syndromes that affected people. And to me, one of the most vicious and terrible things that they did was impose vaccination on our children. Right from the outset, it was apparent that children had the least risk, that children could get COVID and get over it without any problem whatsoever. So why do we need to be injecting dangerous medications with that spike protein? Who knows what that does, how long it lasts, what that even does to your DNA. Why would we even countenance making our children vulnerable to all those things when they had essentially zero risk of dying from COVID? That to me is unconscionable. Those people, as far as I'm concerned, are very guilty. They need to be punished. I won't see it in my lifetime, probably, to my chagrin. But I think it's high time that we started seeing people paying for their sins in this country. People being held to account, people's feet being held to the fire when they are responsible for death and disfiguration, dismemberment of other people. It
Oh,
is
you're
acceptable.
absolutely right. And every time I see that and I look at the teachers, I want to scream and shake them and say, how could you? How could you do this to children when you know as a teacher what the results would be? Most of these children will grow up and they will have some kind of an aversion to something. They'll have some kind of trigger to something. They'll be afraid of something. And most of all, they will comply. And that's what this was all about. You make them so scared that they're afraid to do anything without checking with you. Is it okay if I do that, Dr. Dan? Is it okay if I eat that? Is it okay? Is it okay? Instead of saying, oh, that looks interesting. Let me try it, something new. They're afraid. And I believe that that was the goal. Aside from the fact that they are about 2 years behind the world in education right now, they're afraid. And we have taken away their self-esteem. We have taken away their creativity. We have made them stay in the box. I remember when I was teaching, one of the things that we used to say to the kids all the time is, think outside the box. There's more than one way to solve the problem. Come up with another solution. And they used to love that because they got to experiment and we got to talk about their experiments and how they tried different things and the scientific method and what it meant and how science is changing and everything like that. When was the last time you ever heard a teacher say, think outside the box? It's no, get in the box. You can't get out. You got to be in the box.
Thinking outside the box is not permitted because it's dangerous. It's
Right.
dangerous because it'll lead you to challenge what the people in charge are saying. That is what it is. It's just no different than communist Russia was. You say anything. If the Communist Party said the sky is pink and you said, no, it's not, it's blue, you ended up in the gulag chipping ice cubes or digging whatever they used to do out in the gulag. That's what socialism, what authoritarian governments, totalitarian governments are all about. If you question authority, you run the risk of losing your life. And what was even worse, of course, in communist China was not only you, but your entire family was taken to Siberia along with you. That's really what we have to be afraid of, is ever turning into that kind of society where you cannot be out of the box. You cannot experiment. You cannot speak the truth, because speaking the truth is a revolutionary act in a totalitarian society.
Absolutely. And that is the goal of education, is to force the kids to think inside the box. And that's why I believe, are giving them so many absurd curricula, to see how far they could push them to think inside the box. And when you do that to a person, they want to get out of the box. And here's where I believe all of the mental challenges come, because I'm being forced to do something that I'm not really 100% on, but yet if I don't do it, I'm going to wind up in the gulag. So I'm going to be forced to agree that up is down and down is up and peace is war and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't want to agree. I want to do my own thing. I want to be able to explore. I want to be able to investigate. I want to be able to ask questions. When you stifle that from a child, what happens? Well, they act out because they want to get out. And when that happens, what happens? They go to the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor sends them to the psychiatrist. The child is a problem. And all of a sudden, that child is sitting in class, virtually lifeless, taking Ritalin. And the pharmaceutical companies are going, yay, isn't that wonderful? Another one bites the dust.
Well, that's very true. And what you've, of course, described is what George Orwell described in 1984, where language is used in ways it was never meant to be used, and you're inside the box, and if you get outside, Big Brother notices you immediately, and off you go, where no one will ever hear from you again. Of course, we know that all we're talking about now are the tentacles of one group, one authority on planet Earth, the United Nations, which is guiding all of these efforts at depopulation, the fake hoax, the absolute hoax, I should say, of climate control. All of these things are being guided by the United Nations. And when it comes to disease, the World Health Organization is right at the head of the list, is it not, Karen?
Oh, it certainly is. And I believe it was last year they signed a new agreement that said that the head of WHO, should he declare a health emergency, will be in charge of the world. Oh, really? Really? And
not my world.
To that? And what world is he talking about? Personally, if it was up to me, the United Nations is a beautiful building. I would clear it out, turn it to President Trump and say, make it into apartments for our veterans, because nobody belongs there more than they do. They deserve to have the best, and they should have it, not some arbitrary communist agency whose main goal is to destroy America. And if we can't get you economically, we'll have some wars, and then we'll declare a health emergency. And if we declare a health emergency, and according to Bill Gates, you're going to have to be chipped, because we have to know where you are, and we have to know what you're doing, and we have to be able to monitor your health. Really, yeah, we're going to monitor your health. They're going to monitor our health right as they put us on the train to the gulag. They are, to me, probably the most evil agency that we have in the world. And that is the one that attacks our health and says, you are not in control of your body. And going right back to the beginning, that's where we are.
Well, it's all about control and enriching the global elite, the deep state. Those people, they are only considering in their minds taking back power and grabbing all the money for themselves. All of the things that they want to do, it doesn't apply to them and never will. In their minds, it applies only to the rest of us. They want a society where we live in small, in 15-minute cities, where they can control everything we eat, everything we listen to, everything we play with, everything that we get for medical care. That's what they want, while they're living in the high life somewhere where they have chosen.
I got a question for the audience. Think about this. Over the years, since the United Nations has been in its inception since 1947, how much money have we given the United Nations to eradicate poverty and disease? How much money have we given to them to be able to do that? I would imagine if we counted up all the money that we have given them, it has to be in the trillions somewhere. Between the United States, probably in the hundreds of billions, and the rest of the world, probably to the trillions. So why do we still have poverty and disease? It should be eradicated by now, because they have been stealing the money. That's what this is all about. We always go back to the same thing. It's the
It's
money, it's about the Benjamins.
it's really all of the people in control. They're all doing the same thing at whatever level you want to look at. Just look at our federal government; it's no different. Look at all the trillions of dollars we have given them in our personal, from ourselves, our taxes, the tax on our property, which is a tax on your freedom, the tax on your earnings, which is a tax on your freedom. That all goes to Washington. Where does it go? That was one of the most important things that Elon Musk did. He started peeling back the skin of the onion, and we started to get a look at how much we are being screwed, how much money of ours is being stolen. All of those dollars that are going into people's pockets that are supposed to be going to do the job that the federal government was supposed to do. Well, it's not a limited government anymore. But it is the same thing over and over again. The people in power feel it's their right to steal from the rest of us. That's something that we must stand up and stop, not just in Washington, D.C., but in the United Nations, as you so correctly put. They need to be out of this country. That building needs to be turned into something useful, like housing for veterans would be a great idea.
Well, I would love to see that. And as we were talking across my computer on a scroll, it says, new warning that COVID vaccine causes cancers. A new warning. How many years later? And they have finally decided to warn us. These are our experts, people. These
Well,
are
it's warning after with something that we already know.
yes.
We already know that it causes all kinds of problems with cancer, inflammatory diseases, you name it. So that warning that comes across the scroll, believe me, is a year or two too late.
Yes. And unfortunately, from what I was reading, not in that article, but in a different one, that the real devastation will happen between 5 and 10 years because it will take that long for the diseases to become that critical. And just think about how much money the pharmaceutical companies will make as they are treating those diseases, which ultimately will wind up in someone's death. What is cancer treatment? The hundreds of thousands of dollars they can be. And the government and the senators, I loved what Kennedy said to Elizabeth Warren. Oh, Elizabeth, you've taken over $800,000 from the pharmaceutical companies. $800,000. Do you think she's going to say, I don't think it would be a good idea to take the vaccine? I think you are not, and she did this about 5 or 6 times. She said, but you're not allowing people to take it. And he said, has nothing to do. I never said nobody can take it. He was saying what Latipo was saying. It's just not mandatory. It's just your choice. If you want to get the vaccine, go get the vaccine. Nobody's stopping anybody from getting a vaccine. What we're saying is you don't have to get a vaccine. And I don't recommend it for people who are healthy. Well, she went ballistic at that sentence. By you not recommending it, it means people won't be taking it. Really? Are they that stupid? I guess so. How sad. How sad is that? So I thought it was a wonderful hearing. I thought he did a magnificent job of putting them in their place. Unfortunately, it's going to go on deaf ears, which is very sad. But I was happy to see that President Trump, aside from all of those people that are calling for his resignation, that are begging that he leave, that he resign, that Trump fire him, Trump is not going to fire him. He's doing a marvelous job. He's cleaning up, and he's doing exactly what we elected President Trump to do: find the right people to weed out the sources of destruction to America.
Well, this is very true, Karen. We've covered a lot of incredible subjects tonight. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you would like to say? Because we could go on. What
Oh,
do you want to say?
oh, the only other thing that I can think about is if we don't get our kids out of public school, we are going to be sunk, because all of these programs only work if the people allow them to work. And we can't be fooled by the government lies, and we have to be. That was the hardest thing for me to accept when I first started doing this a long time ago. It was the hardest thing for me to understand the magnitude of the lies. But boy, when Obama was in office, they just popped right out in your face. Almost every other word out of his face was a lie. So we have to understand that. We have to realize that right now in our government, we have a group of people that are only there because it benefits them, not benefiting us, benefiting them. When I ran for office, I was not really interested in looking for donations. So I had $20,000 in my war chest, and I thought that was terrific. My opponent went to Miami and came back with $400,000. And I'm thinking to myself, why on earth would he need all of that money for a job that paid him less than $50,000 a year? And then I realized why he needed that money. So there are things that we need to do. One of them is to clean up our voters, clean up our voter rolls. And my other pet topic is the primaries. So if we have a couple of minutes, I'd like to talk about the primaries.
I think the primaries are the most important thing to talk about, because that is where we can weed out the people, the rhinos, the people who say they are Republicans, but really philosophically they're not, or they're getting paid not to be philosophically conservative. The primaries is where we have to get rid of them. That is a
Well,
very, very important thing.
the sad part is if you are in a red state or a blue state, the primary winner of the primary election is the one that goes on to win. And we see that time and time again. The winner of the primary is going to be the winner of the general. So the sad part is people don't vote in the primary. And I'll give an example. In Miami-Dade, the mayor of Miami-Dade, and I don't care whether he's doing a wonderful job or a horrible job, that's not the point. He was elected by 19% of the voters, because only 19% of the voters voted in the primary. And once his name was on the ballot for the general, it didn't matter who voted. And we have a bad habit of saying, oh, they're an R or a D, so I'll vote for that one. I don't have to vote in the primary. I'll just vote in the general for the R or the D, whoever your preference is, without realizing that we are giving our vote away. I believe the primary is more important than the general, because that's where we get to really know the person that we are going to choose to be our elected official. These people are coming around begging for our vote, and we say nothing. And they tell us, well, I went to this school and my family is this, and I go to church, and I've lived in Florida and in my community for X number of years. Aren't I a wonderful person? And I look good and I sound good, and I'll follow President Trump. So isn't that terrific? That doesn't mean anything, does it?
No, because realistically, where we have to really concentrate is in local politics. That's really where we can get most done. In our counties, in our towns, those are the elections that are now going to be most powerful, where we can have the most power, is if we can control our counties, our towns, our townships, whatever you have, that small area that you can elect people who will, in fact, listen to you because you know them, you know where they live, and you can knock on their door.
Well, we also have a bad habit of not asking the second question. We'll ask them the first question. Oh, I love fossil fuel. I think it's so important. We need to have fossil fuel. Nobody says why. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to solve the problem that in Florida we're growing more solar farms than food farms? How is that going to help the energy cost in Florida? Nobody asks the second question. And that's what is easy to do in a primary because they're coming around to us. They want to hear from us. And we are in town halls where we get a chance to talk. And we are giving that away. And the other thing, of course, and I'm relating to Florida because that's where I am, you don't have to prove you are a citizen. You have to say whether or not you are a citizen, but nobody asks anybody for proof. You have a little box on your application and it says, are you a citizen? So if I check the box yes, nobody's going to ask me, what proof do you have? Do you have your birth certificate? Do you have your passport? No, I don't have those things. Well, then how could you be a citizen? Oh, well, maybe I'm not. More than likely you're not. So the supervisor of elections of your county is the most important because that is where the checking begins. And in Florida, they play a nice little game. And that is the supervisor of elections says, oh, the Secretary of State checks the citizenship. And then you talk to the Secretary of State's office and they ask them, how do you check citizenship in Florida? They say, oh, the supervisor of elections checks the citizenship. So they have a nice little back and forth. And in the meantime, we have hundreds of ballots. And in a small county or in any county, hundreds of ballots changes an election. So I am begging everybody, spread the word. We have to have more than 20% of the people voting in the primary. The primary is it. And the other thing is, if you want to get rid of an incumbent who is a rhino and you feel that they're not doing a good job, don't have 10 other people running for the same office like they're doing in New York. In New York, they're almost saying to Mandami, here's the keys to the city, because we have 3 people who are so egotistical that each one thinks they're going to lead, that they should just draw straws, and whoever is the winner, the other 2 get behind them, and then they would beat Mandami because they forgot what the goal is. What is the goal? Not to have a communist in there as mayor of this city. But again, Americans are too egotistical. They think too highly of themselves instead of saying what's right for the city. So a couple of things people can do is vote in the primary, support and vet your candidate. And when it comes to the end and it's election time and you see a ticket with lots of people's names on it, go to those people and ask them to come together and choose one, because the goal should be to get rid of the rhino, not have the rhino reinstated because all the others can't get out of the way.
Very wise words. Very important to heed those words. A lot of times it's the establishment of the party that runs some of those fake candidates in order to make sure the rhino wins. This is something that has been happening, especially in the last 10 to 15 years. When the Tea Party movement was trying to get rid of people, they were always confronted in every election with fake Tea Party candidates, all put in there by the GOP establishment. So it really is going to take an effort of people getting involved in the electoral process. making sure that they vet the candidates, go to all those meetings, and tell your friends, get out of the house and vote. No, you
Yes,
can't be sitting there and doing nothing on election day. Nowadays, it's ridiculous. You have like 2 weeks to vote. There's no excuse for not voting.
right. And if you don't vote, you can't complain. That's my
True.
rule. Not interested. Not interested in somebody telling me something about how awful it is, because my question to them is always, did you vote? And if they said no, I'm not interested because you didn't do your part. And don't think that the voting is the last thing that you have to do. Voting is the first thing that you have to do. You've got to watch these people. You've got to make sure that they're doing what they said they were going to do when they got elected to office. We have a big problem in Tallahassee, in Florida, that they did not do what they said they were going to do. And they passed a bill that actually says prohibits the local government from making decisions with regard to zoning and height requirements of buildings. How could a legislator pass that bill? And the ones that have passed it need to be gone. They need to be deep sixed. And it's up to us to bring that out and to watch them and to vet them. And also, what you were saying was absolutely right, but they go even a step further. We have Democrats who will register as Republicans and run as Republicans so that they can vote with the Democrats. And we have that going on in Florida also. So Florida may be the, quote, free state, but you got to do a little digging. You got to ask why. You got to ask how. You got to ask questions. And if we don't, shame on us.
Karen Schoen, thank you so very much for being a guest on Freedom Forum Live. We've had a great discussion. I hope that we will see you again. And once again, thanks. Great discussion tonight.
Thank you for having me. It is always wonderful to talk to you, and I certainly look forward to working with you again. And I'd like you to be a guest on my show, and if I can plug it, it is The Prism of America's Education on the AmericaOutloud.news network, and you can find me at KarenBSchoen.com. So thank you so much for this opportunity. It is wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you, and good night, everyone.